let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We have a
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say a
As the
developer-
Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours. I am Andrew Sullivan, joined as always by the amazing, awesome, and incredible Mr. Jonny Rickard. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
It's a Wednesday. It's pre-hurricane here in the Raleigh area, so I think they're calling for something like 6 inches of rain over the next 36, 48 hours, something like that. So exciting times.
Yeah, always. We had a decent amount of rain, and when it softens the ground up, I don't know if I think I've probably told you this before, but like I have an issue with wild hogs. So when the ground softens up, the hogs come out, and
Tear it
they
all up.
destroyed the side of my yard again, and I hate them so much.
Around here they it's been raining. We've gotten quite a bit of rain, so the ground's kind of saturated. So usually the big thing is the flooding. So
Mhm.
there's a road I travel pretty frequently that has a low spot with a stream that goes through it. So I fully expect that one to be blocked off. And my youngest came home, so we do year-round school. So
Mhm.
they 9 weeks in, 3 weeks out. So my two youngest are currently in school, even though it's still early by most people's standards. Anyway, so my youngest comes home from school the other day. She goes, "My teacher thinks that we might be out of school Thursday and Friday because of the hurricane." I'm like, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But on the other hand, I could see it being entirely possible. I'm sure they'll look forward to it.
Oh yeah. Well, especially if you get a good enough deluge, right? Like it'll definitely slow things down at least, right? Like I mean, it can be a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Well, anytime there's road flooding, I get it. The schools want to be safe with school
Mhm.
buses. If the winds are above a certain amount, I can only imagine that one of those, sail-shaped school buses makes for, a
Oh yeah.
good opportunity to get toppled. So,
Oh yeah.
and honestly, I'm okay with that. Better safe than sorry, as they say. What were we talking about today, Jonny?
So today we're going to talk about something that we should have been talking about a little bit, probably a month ago. But 4.16 was released. They had the what's new in late June, and so today we're going to talk about what's new in 4.16 for administrators. And so I think we've got a pretty full docket. We've got a long list of things to get through.
Yeah. It was funny because I was going through and pulling things out from the presentation, the live stream that the product management team did. We have a thing inside of Red Hat called Whole Company Readiness that goes and has further details on a bunch of other things. And it very quickly approached me. I was like, wow, I need to start pruning this list because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So I think what we'll end up doing is based off of feedback, based on what folks are requesting. If you want details on something, what we can do is take some of the things that we touch on today and turn those into more or longer streams that go even more in depth and start showing some things. So as you're listening to us, if you're live, feel free to chat and let us know what's interesting and what you'd like to see more on, because Jonny and I, we have some clusters that we can poke at and show some things, but some topics are just going to be like they warrant spending 45 minutes or an hour going in depth on. So if something like that is interesting to you, just let us know. And likewise, if you're not watching us live, if you're just listening to us after the fact, feel free to reach out. Email, as always, is probably the easiest way or the fastest way to get a hold of us. Jonny, Jonny at redhat.com, or Sully, Sully at redhat.com. And we are very happy to I'll say build out our calendar of topics, even though it seems like we've got a pretty full, I haven't looked at it recently, but I think we're already scheduling out in September, if not October, for topics. So yeah, never a dull moment. That being said, and before we get into the meat and potatoes here, I think we had some top of mind topics. You were going to ask or do a poll, right?
Yes. So I've been working with the observability team. So if you remember, we had Christian on. We've had oh man, I should have written these damn names down before I started trying to remember them. But we've had a couple of people from the observability team come on, and they sent me a list of topics of things that like that they're ready to come on in the stream and talk about. But because there's so many, I wanted to give our audience a chance to basically choose from a few of these, or maybe if you want all of them, we can do all of them, but it would just take some time to get through. So I'm going to paste the list here.
Oh man, hopefully
And I really wish I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So I'll fix that. But like the first one is full stack network observability with the EBF. Oh my God, full stack network observability with eBPF, and then the other one is network observability in eBPF, and then Kiali to observe the mesh you created, and then Loki, a game changer, and then OpenShift and the observability stack. I'll break this list up so it doesn't look so jumbled together. But if eBPF is something that Andrew and I have been talking about for a long time. It's something that like it's in the mainstream now, and I think it'd be awesome to have them come on and talk about. We're going to do multi-cluster observability, where they're going to come on and they're going to talk about observability across multiple platforms, and then take a look at this list. Let us know which ones you like. Email us. We'll hopefully, if you're watching right now, you can respond now, and then otherwise we'll pick for you, and we'll try and get them on at least once or twice a month until we get through the list.
Yeah. Observability, eBPF, as you said, that's a big one. It's honestly something that like I sort of know what it does, but I don't know details, and so it's definitely one that I'm interested in learning more about. We keep hearing more and more about it. From our observability folks, from customers, a lot of you folks, are asking us about it, and I think that'll be a good one at a minimum. So I will, I'll put my vote on that column there.
Yeah.
Not that the others aren't interesting as well. So.
Yeah, and they had a couple different ones, right? So it's like the full stack was pretty awesome, then or just the plain Jane, the plain vanilla, whatever. It's they just call it like the eBPF network observability. And then the Kiali one, because there was so much interest in service mesh, I figured like the Kiali would probably be a topic that would garner a lot of attention. So if not, well, we don't have to do it. But they're interested in coming on. They're excited to keep coming out and talking about what they're doing. So I'm excited to have them.
Yeah, likewise. See the other one that you put in here, because I had a couple of things, but I'm going to roll them down into when we start talking about today's topic. So. What was the other one that you had?
Yep, the last one is Advanced Cluster Manager, Rackham, 2.11 released, and some of the key features of this are simplifying Kubernetes management at scale, extended support for CNCF conformant distributions, streamlined operator management, automated ROSA discovery and import, and then a global hub for multi-site management. And then the last thing is the enhanced control and insight capability. So again, this multi-cluster observability, the story, all these things are starting to tie in with the features that are coming out in some of these products across like the OpenShift Platform Plus and stuff like that. And Christian kind of touched on this a little bit last week too, but like with the CNCF conformant distributions and the support for that inside of ACM. So it's all coming together. It's going to be one big awesome package.
There was wasn't there a blog about that somewhere?
Maybe.
I swear that there was a.
Is that what we? Let me find.
Well, I say that. I thought that there was a blog, but the link that I have, so our internal product announcement and launch email, it takes me to the Red Hat Content Center, and that's not a public thing, so maybe not. And I lied. I did have one thing that I wanted to add, and that is the ACS cloud service is now generally available. So let me share my screen real quick. So I'll paste this link into chat as well. So if you're not familiar, right, so Advanced Cluster Security is one of the services or features, capabilities, products, we'll go with products, from Red Hat that is not specific to OpenShift. So ACS works with multiple different Kubernetes, along with Advanced Cluster Manager being the same. So available as a cloud service basically means that it is now hosted and managed by Red Hat, and you connect your clusters into it, and you're able to go off and do things. So definitely take a look at this. I think it's really interesting to see that it's available as a managed service, and you can see down here at the bottom there is a no-cost trial available if you want to try it out and see what ACS means and looks like and how it works for you. I've said before, and I think we've even had Mike Foster on, as well as they have their own live stream. ACS does some really cool things. I like the network policy management piece, being able to visually see how all the pods are communicating with each other, or VMs as the case may be, being able to implement rules, right, all that other stuff directly from within the interface, but also all the runtime security stuff, super cool. It tells you when processes are starting, what the process is. You can set up rules to prevent processes from running. Like, hey, this pod is supposed to be running, a Java process. Why is Bash starting inside of it? And immediately, stop that from happening before anything happens inside of there. So really cool stuff there. I'll also take a moment to point out, so for a long time, we had blog.openshift.com or openshift.com/blog. I'm trying to adjust my window here so that way it fits the thing. Anyways.
More better.
Yeah. So anyways, all of the blogs have been rolled underneath the main Red Hat site. So if you go to blog.redhat.com or redhat.com/blog, you'll land at this page. And from here, there is just, I'll say, an almost overwhelming amount of things that are getting published, because this is from across all of Red Hat, all of the different things that are going on across all of the different products and everything else. So like here you see, here's the ACS or ACM rather announcement. Here's Quay 3.12, which released ACS 4.5. So you can see there's a ton of stuff, but really the way I like to do this is if you go to Open Hybrid Cloud down here under the channels, this is all of the things for OpenShift. So if you're curious about specifically OpenShift things, this is the channel that you would want to pay attention to. So lots of really cool stuff in here. There's constantly things being published from kind of all across Red Hat. Anything you can imagine, they'll eventually cover it. Like here, OpenShift Virtualization, FAQs from the field, 100 gigabit Ethernet network efficiency, right? Which I'll talk about something tangential to that here in a moment. What's new in OpenShift Virtualization 4.16. Anyways, great place, lovely place to go and find all of the information that you could ever possibly hope to want. And if you need some bedtime reading, right? Let's see. That was all we had for top of mind, I think.
Yep. We got one question that just came in. I'm not sure if you'll know it either, but Jacob asked, is the SaaS offering part of OPP? So if you have OPP, right, you get ACS and ACM and all that, right? So if you use the SaaS, does your OPP cover that, or is that an additional cost?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I know who we can ask.
Dun, dun, dun.
So yeah.
All right, Jacob, we'll get it figured out for you.
Yeah. In fact, I will type that question into my Slack channel over here and ask real quick.
So in case everybody is unaware, we have a celebrity in the audience, and that's Christian. So Christian, welcome to the stream. It's been a long time. And also Mr. Dwayne, it's been a while. Yeah, so Andrew, I'll just start kicking off some of the stuff if you want.
Yeah, please do while I'm trying to get that question answered.
Yep. So, with the 4.16 release, there was a lot of things, a lot of goodies that came out, and we're gonna try and move through a lot of these. There were some that like Andrew and I were talking about, but like it seems like it's probably better for like its own stream. And one of those is gonna be like the OC version, the OC Mirror version 2. There's a lot of things that are changing in the way that we're collecting images and all the resources for disconnected installs or restricted installs, however you want to look at it. So we're going to set up another live stream where that's what we focus on, basically soup to nuts, disconnected install, where we're creating a mirror registry, we're mirroring the content, we're deploying a cluster from it, and then that way you can see like the full workflow of how it's supposed to go. We'll walk through documentation. We'll complain about where documentation is wrong, or celebrate it when it's right. But yeah, just be on the lookout for that. It's coming soon. So hopefully in like the next couple of weeks that we'll be able to put something out like that.
Yeah, and that's something that we did like 2.5 or 3 years ago. I think it was one of the first streams after you joined the stream. So it was back in like the 30s or 40s on the episode numbers. So definitely time for a refresh on that. There's probably a number of things that we need to go back and refresh because, believe it or not, OpenShift 4 celebrated its 5th birthday a couple of weeks ago. Like, that's crazy. So for any Red Hatters who saw all the emails about OpenShift Week and all that, that was the week that OpenShift 4 was released. So just crazy to think how long we've been with OpenShift 4. Already 5 years. We're on 4.16 now, and it keeps going on.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm excited about it. I'm happy about it. I know, right?
Yeah, it's crazy thinking about it because like I remember being at Tech Exchange in Florida when they were announcing it. Like when it's like, okay, we're going to start talking about, we're actually going to start showing it, stuff like that. Like, wow, this is awesome.
Yep. Actually, that was the first time you and I ran into each other here at Red Hat.
Yeah.
Because we were walking through the halls. Yeah, we're walking through the halls, and I hear my name. I'm like, man, that voice sounds familiar. And turn around, and there's Jonny. Like, so Christian, when will OpenShift 5 be announced? I've not heard any plans. Andrew is not privy to everything that goes on, but I've not heard any plans for OpenShift 5. Somebody asked about that internally not too long ago, and my response was, the impetus for the version change from OpenShift 3 to OpenShift 4 was the operator framework. Right? We completely changed the way that the clusters were deployed and managed to use operators, to the IPI, UPI, non-integrated paradigm, all that other stuff. And I don't know. I am not aware. Everybody can see the roadmap. If you go to red.ht/next and new, I don't see anything on the roadmap that looks like that significant of a change. So it's, unless some random marketing person decides to draw a line in the sand that says new major version, I'd be curious to know. Or let me rephrase that: I don't know anything about that. No inside knowledge there. OpenShift with boot C. Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. I have opened some questions or asked some questions about when like OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization or sandbox containers and that type of stuff will support boot C, and which is image based rel. I'm curious. I'll be curious to see what happens there. I don't know that is a fundamental enough shift, but we'll see. Yeah, thanks for posting that link in there, Jonny.
Yeah, no problem.
So without further ado, so first and foremost, this is an office hours live stream here with Red Hat Live Streaming. So for anybody who's watching us live, feel free in the chat to ask us questions about anything and everything OpenShift that comes to mind. So while we are talking about what's new in 4.16 for administrators today, don't let that limit your imagination on the questions you want to ask, and we'll do our best to get those answered. Or worst case scenario is we have to ask and wait for a response, or maybe follow up with a response if we can't get one. If you are not watching us live, as I said before, feel free to send us questions. If there's anything that comes to mind, anything you want to know more about with regard to the things we'll be talking about today, feel free to send us email. Jonny, J-O-N-N-Y at redhat.com, or Sully, S-U-L-L-Y at redhat.com. We're happy to take care of that. But don't be shy, y'all. I know y'all aren't, so I'm not gonna worry about that. So let's talk about what's new in 4.16, Jonny. Let me pull out my tab here so that way I can look at these things side by side.
Yes, me too.
You want to kick it off? You want me to kick it off?
How about you go?
All right. Let's see.
If you're ready.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip around here. Hopefully I don't get these confused and forget anything. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is etcd. Let's share my window here. Are you who I want? You are who I want. So the first thing I want to talk about is etcd. And in particular, with OpenShift 4.16, there are two different things that have changed. So one is, in Tech Preview, we have the ability to specify the size for the etcd database. So historically, the size has always been 8 gigabytes. Right? Up until 4.16, you had one choice of database size for etcd, and it was either 8 gigabytes, or 8 gigabytes. So now we are making this a little bit more flexible based on a number of different things. And you can see, walking through changing the database size. Just keep in mind that this is a technology preview feature in 4.16. So why would we need to increase the size of etcd? So this can be important in a couple of different, or for a couple of different things. One, I have a cluster that has many, many, many different objects inside of it. So, now with, I think it was OpenShift 4.13 or 4.14, we increased the maximum pod count per node to 2,500. So not only can I have a lot of pods, but I have a lot of secrets. I have a lot of deployments, a lot of config maps, all of these other things. All of that gets stored in etcd. So if you have need of this, maybe check it out. One thing to point out, so I'll switch over to my cluster here and go to observe and go to dashboards. So this is a OpenShift 4.16 cluster. This one's been running for a couple of days now. It's got a few VMs in it and stuff like that. But really what I want to show you here is this is the etcd that's running inside of my cluster. And if we come down here, you see my database size is only a couple hundred megabytes. So 8 gigabytes is really a lot. I would not expect, in the vast majority of cases, for this to need to be changed. And changing the size of the database does not change the performance requirements. Just keep that in mind. So, it still needs, we still want to have relatively low latency. And remember that latency here is, the low latency here is relative. Relatively low latency for all of the things that I can use. What I say relative. Go ahead.
No, your audio like went underwater for a little bit. Like you sounded kind of just, but now it sounds fine.
I don't know what's going on with this thing lately. I've been having yesterday or the day before, I was on meetings and my camera would come on and be on for about 30 seconds and then blip out, and then come on and then blip out. I don't know what's going on with it. And then I was doing using WebEx, doing a presentation, and the microphone kept switching. He would just randomly pop up and switch to a different one of the microphones that's connected to the laptop.
Oh, that's annoying. Because
there's this one, there's one on the camera, there's one in the headphones, there's the microphone on the laptop itself. So I have a little speakerphone. I feel like it might be a little out of control, actually. Yeah, I would just randomly select between them. Let's see. Let me look at chat here. I saw things going off here. Is the idea to reduce bottleneck? With the database size? No, not necessarily. We're talking a few gigabytes of change here. So it's not really reducing a database, or reducing a bottleneck or anything like that. Rather, it's just, hey, I've got a bunch of objects and, I just need more space, more capacity in the database to keep up with that. So that being said, so when we talk about bottlenecks, so the selectable profiles, this blog post that I have up here, this has been around for a little bit. You see November 10th was when the blog post was posted. This allows us to specify different storage, or let me rephrase that, different configuration profiles for etcd to help, I'm going to say, manage different scenarios based off of, in particular, storage, but sometimes also network latency. So what do I mean by that? So typically, in a normal environment, we expect etcd to be able to do its operations, complete an operation within 50 milliseconds. So if I come down here and I look at, is it RPC? Nope. Where is it? Pure round trip time. Yeah, I think it's pure round trip time. Anyways, what we expect is for the entire operation of an etcd commit. So, hey, I need to store data in etcd. Okay, the leader receives that information. It sends it to the other two nodes. The other two nodes receive it. They act that they received it. That goes back to the leader. The leader acts the act, and then everybody commits that to disk. So the goal is all of that happens in under 50 milliseconds. And when we see latency, whether it's in the form of disk writes or in the form of network, that can affect how long those commits take. This is what limits, among other things, etcd scalability. So by tuning these profiles, we aren't fixing any underlying issues. We aren't magically enabling etcd to be able to go from 1,000 operations per second to 10,000 operations per second because we increase these intervals. Instead, what we're doing is we're avoiding, I'll say, complicating the issue by having timeouts. So normally what would happen is, you see here the heartbeat interval. If it doesn't hear from a peer within 100 milliseconds, it causes it to be marked as invalid. And I almost knocked over my coffee cup. Causes it to be marked invalid. And then we can trigger things like leader elections. Leader elections cause etcd to pause while it's doing that election, which means that the API server pauses, which has its own set of ripples. So what we're doing by changing these profiles is we're modifying these timeouts to prevent those types of things from happening. If performance, latency for those commit operations is a bottleneck, we're not fixing that. We're just preventing, compounding issues from making things worse to a point. So this is now GA as well. It might have been GA already, and I'm not remembering. But yeah, it definitely, etcd is a key, core, and critical component of the control plane. That being said, it is only one aspect. The other major one is the API server. So there are some improvements, and was it William that we had on? I think it was William that we had on that was talking about how, as we roll forward in the next few versions, we're going to see a lot of improvements to the API server as well, for how it manages memory, how it manages CPU to increase that scalability. So lots of really cool things happening there and thank you for being on top of things with all the links, Jonny.
Oh yeah, no problem.
So that's what I got for etcd.
Yeah, and just to run through it, sorry, really quick, like the etcd patch, it's super easy. Like you patch it. The default is standard, right? So it's actually empty. So if you were to look at it, at least in my AWS cluster, out of the box, there was no control plane hardware parameter until I patched it. And then when I patched it, then you could actually see it in there and you could actually look for it and stuff like that. But yeah, it's standard or slower or empty, and default is empty. So super easy to set. I didn't notice anything when I had patched my cluster to see, like, well, I was just curious what was going to happen, and nothing really happened from my from my view.
I don't know what's going on with this cluster and why it's not. Come on, buddy. You can open the terminal for me. There we go. Yeah, see, I don't have any backend quota set for this particular one. I'm just looking for the spec here.
Yeah, I've got spec and then control plane. Yeah, so see, it's empty out of the box. So. Yep.
Yeah, so it'll go with the default 8 gigabytes.
Yep.
So again, this is one of those things. Andrew was a young administrator once, and especially a storage administrator. I love to tune things. I feel like this is one of those things where we don't want to necessarily pre-tune or pre-optimize. Instead, use the monitoring tools at our disposal, keep an eye on it. And if we start to think it is approaching an issue, then we make an adjustment. Don't preemptively or proactively do it if you don't know that it's going to be an issue.
And to go back to Jacob's question, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sully, but like the way that etcd is when it puts something in the database, it never actually deletes it or overwrites it. It's just another layer, right? And so it reads that latest layer first. And so it's always just kind of plugging it in versus like, you're removing content, adding content.
It will eventually clear things out when it does a defragmentation. So until you do the defrag and compact, basically it just continuously applies.
Gotcha.
Or appends, I should say. Other things that we've got going on here. So let's see. We talked about that. Thank you for putting checkboxes in here, Jonny. This is really
man. I know.
You are on top of it today.
Today's my day.
Let's see. So virtualization. So for those who don't know, virtualization is consuming a lot of my time these days, which it has been for the last couple of years. So OpenShift Virtualization 4.16 is also available. I think it released maybe a week after OpenShift 4.16 itself. So it is one of the layered products or layered capabilities. If we look inside of my cluster here, you can see that I've got the virtualization tab and I have a number of VMs running. One thing I've noticed, by the way, with 4.16 and the new console, all these getting started things, they're no longer closed. Like, remember, you used to have the X and it would just dismiss this thing. Now they're collapsible.
Oh, nice.
So I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's a thing. So with virtualization, there's a couple of things that have been added. A lot of work with the virtualization side of things is going on behind the scenes. It's not immediately visible in here. One of the huge ones that the engineering team has been spending time on is what we're calling safe memory over commitment with virtualization. And really, it's with Kubernetes as a whole. So what does that mean? So today and historically, Kubernetes has no method for dealing with memory over commitment. So when the physical node or virtual node, when the node starts to encounter memory pressure, specifically once it reaches the eviction threshold, the only solution that the node has is the out of memory kill process, where it goes in and it terminates without prejudice, processes until it gets below the memory threshold. So for a virtualization solution, this is bad, right? If I'm overcommitting my memory, which is relatively common with virtualization, and my physical node starts to fill up on memory and it goes in and it starts just killing virtual machines, that makes applications sad. So for up until this point, including now because it's still tech preview, the default behavior is for OpenShift virtualization to create a request for the full amount of memory for the virtual machines plus a little bit of overhead. So this way you have no memory overcommit of virtual machines within the cluster. And that avoids the scenario where OOM kill takes action and, destroys virtual machines. So as of 4.16, we have tech preview for memory overcommitment with swap. So let me see. I meant to bring this up this documentation page. So what this means is that we are able to turn on swap on the nodes. And then from the virtualization perspective, it will behave just like you would expect. When the node memory starts to exceed the threshold, it will begin swapping that memory to disk while it live migrates virtual machines away, ideally based off of those eviction policies. So super important for a number of different workloads. Keep in mind, this is tech preview. So why has it taken OpenShift Virtualization G8 and OpenShift 4.5? It is now OpenShift 4.16, and we're seeing tech preview on swapping and safe memory overcommit. Why has it taken this long? Because all of this work has happened upstream. So it's taken us time to work with the upstream projects and the upstream communities in order to not just sell the validity of this, but also do the work and incorporate it in a Kubernetes native way. So, for a long time, and maybe even now, the default is still remember one of the first things you do when deploying Kubernetes is to turn off swap on the underlying node, right? Swap off, -A. And so this is changing one of those fundamental behaviors. I think this is really exciting. I think it's going to open up a lot of really interesting use cases for virtualization, particularly in pre-prod environments. As I talk with more and more virtualization customers, I'm seeing that it is no longer as common as it used to be to not overcommit memory in production environments, which is not to say if you're doing that today, there's anything wrong with that. I'm just seeing more of it than honestly I expected from a while ago. Let's see. I'm looking at the chat here because I saw some things floating by. Fernando, where do I start with OpenShift? And I see a couple of folks are posting things in here. DO080 is a great starting point if you have no idea where to start at because it's free. Anybody can go and register. It's a self-paced learning course. And then to Jacob's point, DO180 is a good sort of broad overview. And then depending on whether you want to do administrator things or developer-y things, there's kind of different tracks that fork based off of that. But at a minimum, DO080 and 180 are great starting points.
Yep.
What else is happening in, let's see, virtualization? The reference implementation guide. So if we go to red.ht/vert ref guide, we have this document that is effectively our opinionated way of deploying an OpenShift cluster for virtualization. So as you scroll through this, if you're considering OpenShift as an enterprise data center virtualization solution, this is a great starting point for identifying the configuration, the things that you would want to put into the cluster. And by put here, I mean things like all of the operators and how to configure them and all that other stuff inside of there. So excellent document. I'm slightly biased because I helped contribute to it. Excellent document on just how to get started and the considerations to have and all this other stuff. So things like using bonded NICs for the management in SDN. Down here, configuring default CPU models. How to configure the bonds, which we document here, as well as we come down here, how to do things like utilize OVN and OVS secondary networks with a bridge in order to do like support network policy on virtual machines that are connected directly to external VLANs. So lots of really cool stuff in there. Definitely recommend you check that one out.
That is awesome. And Jacob agrees.
Yeah. Yeah, glad. I hope it's helpful. I know, so this was based on 4.15 originally. I think we are looking at an update in the 4.17 timeframe because there's going to be a bunch of changes in 4.17 with the networking that will, I think, positively change. And by I know they will positively change how we do things, particularly with regards to VM network isolation. So today you have the option of OVN secondary networks. I think we've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
So OVN secondary networks. And these OVN secondary networks, you kind of have two options for the topology, layer 2 and local net. Layer 2 creates another overlay network that exists just within the OpenShift cluster. And you can attach virtual machines to that. However, today it does not support egress. So the network interfaces that are connected to that overlay network cannot reach the outside world. So among other things, they're adding functionality around that, around doing, I think it's called UDS or UDN. So it's like sort of like VRF, but not quite VRF across OVN Kubernetes and lots of other really cool stuff inside of there. I'll also point out that a number of our partners also do some really cool things here. Props in particular to the Tigera Calico folks. I've seen a number of demos of theirs where they're doing just amazing things with virtual machines at the SDN level. It's really cool. What was the last one that I had here? I don't have an ACM cluster, but ACM added a number of new features as well in 2.11 around virtual machine observability. So being able to go into ACM, you search for virtual machines and it pops up all of the VMs across all of the clusters and you can go in and look at performance stats and all of that other stuff for those. We should invite those guys back on too, Jonny, sometime to talk about not just 2.11, but a lot of the other stuff that's coming up.
Yeah, I've been talking to Scott kind of behind the scenes and him and Paul and yeah, so trying to get them on. So it's going to happen.
Let's see. I could keep on rolling here if or you can jump in at any time you'd like.
I am actually deploying the web terminal operator in my cluster. So if you want to go one more, then I'll jump in.
Okay.
And I said Paul, I meant Brad, not Paul.
Yeah,
not even close.
I knew who you were talking about. So let's talk about some installer changes. So first and foremost, if we come up here to the release notes, you'll notice that if I'm searching here, and as well as if we look in the install documents, there is no Red Hat virtualization here. Red Hat virtualization is fully, wholly, completely no longer supported with OpenShift. So I think 4.13 was the last officially fully supported version. They were giving some support exceptions, I think, to 4.14, but 4.15, 4.16, it's gone from OpenShift here. And I want to say this month is when Red Hat Virtualization enters the final phase of its lifecycle. Let's see if we can find that. Red Hat, oops. So if we look at the Red Hat Virtualization lifecycle, yep. So yeah, August 31st is when maintenance support ends, and it is in ELP. So if you are still utilizing Red Hat Virtualization, now is definitely the time to. Hopefully, you're already in the depths of making your planned migration to OpenShift Virtualization is the natural successor within the Red Hat portfolio. So if you haven't started planning that yet, I definitely would highly encourage you to begin doing that. And in case you're curious what extended life phase means, if we scroll down here to extended life phase, the definition is down here. So limited ongoing technical support, no bug fixes, security fixes, hardware enablement, or root cause analysis will be available. So kind of a big deal. The two big things that I wanted to talk about with the install experience. So one, there's always changes that are happening with the installer and the platforms that are available. If you did not watch the What's New, definitely check that out. The PM team did a great job of talking about things like, I believe, Oracle Cloud using virtual machines, not bare metal, but deploying OpenShift to Oracle Cloud and virtual machines is now GA and fully supported. So just things like that are always happening. The really cool one that I wanted to talk about is Appliance Builder. So if we come up here, one of these tabs, here we go, Appliance Builder User Guide. So the Appliance Builder is really interesting from my perspective. And I think I briefly mentioned this on one of the previous streams, and it's now more thoroughly documented. You can see it was updated recently, and it is now officially in tech preview status. So Appliance Builder is interesting because basically it fully packages up the OpenShift release so that you can create an ISO, you put that, you attach it to a server, or you image the disk of the server and then you send it out to somewhere and you turn it on. And it effectively mimics the appliance-based, or excuse me, the agent-based installer mechanism to deploy the cluster, with the added bonus, if you will, of it has no external dependencies aside from, DNS. So I don't have to have a registry available. I don't have to mirror all of my images disconnected. I don't have to have my proxy configured. It doesn't have to have internet access. And all of the images that I need to deploy the cluster are contained inside of that image. So Andrew's personal opinion, this is super helpful for, I want to get a cluster up and running relatively quickly. I go and I generate the appliance-based installer. I put it on my nodes and I turn them on, and a little while later, I have a cluster that's up and running, and now I can begin to deploy all of my sort of day zero services for other things inside of there. So, hey, I don't have a spare machine laying around, right? It's a completely greenfield deployment. I don't have a spare machine laying around to even stand up a mirror or a registry to mirror the images to. So now I can get that infrastructure up and running in order to do those types of things, or deploy a virtual machine that can provide additional, features, capabilities for various things. So this
I really like this.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting hands-on as it goes through, tech preview and all that, getting personally hands-on with it more, and finding all of the different ways that we can utilize this thing, and just really, and I know we position it, if you look up here, that we position it with partners as being a way for our hardware partners to install and make OpenShift available from, the moment that the server is shipped. But even as administrators, I think this is a really cool feature.
Yeah, I agree.
The last one that I had, did I not make a link to that? Is the simplified day 2 node add stuff. And now I got to remember what I did with that link. So this one uses the agent-based install experience, and it makes it easier to add nodes. Where did my... node add. Sorry, I'm trying to find. Aha. So this is in dev preview. And I'm trying to find if I have the documentation for this somewhere. Nope. So I will see if I can dig up the documentation. So it's a dev preview feature. We did talk about it during the What's New presentation. Effectively, what you do is you use the OCADM. So OCADM node image dash help. So we have this node image command that allows us to generate an image, an ISO that we can boot our nodes to. And effectively, so I have a cluster that's running, it's been deployed, I want to add a new node to the cluster. I generate an image from the cluster, and then I boot my node, my new node. Wow. Oof. I boot my new node to that image, and it is when it comes up and online, I can then join that node. It's literally an OCADM join node, I think is the command, to add that node to the cluster. So dramatically easier when I want to use the agent-like experience for adding nodes into the cluster, which I think is really cool. Just making life easier if I don't want to use, for example, bare metal operator in order to do that. One thing to note while I'm here, in case you haven't noticed, so in 4.16, the docs team, and I had a call with some of the docs team folks the other day, they've been making some really cool improvements. So one, for example, if I come down here to the install and installing on vSphere, they reorganized all of this. And they made it much easier to kind of follow along and digest what's happening. So if I select on this installation methods, it gives me some details about each one of these. If I go to installer provision infrastructure, I have this broken out into smaller pieces. So this is still a big page because it breaks out all of the different permissions requirements and stuff. Like preparing to install, you see that this page is now much more digestible than if I jump back to 4.15, right? All of this is in like one massive set of pages. That's just, in my opinion, it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really happy to see them making improvements here on, making this easier. I know that they have a bunch of stuff planned. I think I've also talked about this in a previous stream, but docs.redhat.com is sort of the new default place where we should be going for our documentation. My fingers still default to docs.OpenShift. But if I go to the view documentation here, see that we have all of the things that we would expect. And this is this is where all of the things will be happening, all of the new stuff. And I know that the docs team loves this site because it gives them much better control and much better interface. It's easier for them to update. It's standardized across all of the Red Hat documentation, not just OpenShift, but all of the Red Hat products. So I'm trying to retrain my fingers to use docs.redhat instead of docs.OpenShift for things now.
Dude, it'll take time, man. Just because, going back to when OpenShift 4 first came out, everybody's like, use docs.openshift.com. That's it.
Yeah. It reminds me of the switch from Yum to DNF. It took me like a year of using Rel 8 before my brain finally stopped thinking Yum and then having to do like a manual, Yum, no, I mean DNF type thing. Who can we talk to get our product there? Reach out to me or Johnny and we'll try and make the best set of connections that we can.
So we did have one question. It's from Nick9293. It says, currently in my organization, we are running on the AIX server on IBM hardware and virtual machines. How can we migrate this data into Red Hat OpenShift?
So I don't know. It's been a while since I did anything with AIX. So Power is a supported platform. So effectively, you would deploy OpenShift onto AIX or onto Power, I should say, and then you would, depending on how the data is stored, right? If it's in an external PVC, or let me rephrase that, if it is in an external LUN or something like that, you could effectively create a PVC that adds or introduces that existing data into OpenShift. Otherwise, you could do a standard data migration. I realize with anything more than probably a few dozen gigabytes, that's a little bit unreasonable. But yeah, that would be my initial thought. It's an application migration from one platform to another. Note that you did say IBM hardware and VM. So today, if you're thinking OpenShift virtualization and VMs, OpenShift virtualization only supports x86. It does not support ARM, Power, Z, etc. Any thoughts on that one, Jonny?
I was just going to say use like either MTV for the if you're migrating virtual machines, or whatever it's called, migration toolkit for, I think it's containers or something like that, for like your data, because that can actually move the PVCs and stuff across.
Yeah, but that would be MTC only works Kubernetes to Kubernetes or OpenShift to OpenShift.
That's true.
And MTV only works if the source is Rev, vSphere, or OpenStack, and only with x86. So it would probably have to be done manually and outside of one of those processes.
Old school.
Yeah. I don't know if surely I don't know. I can speculate on some things, but I don't want to do that because invariably I'll end up being wrong, and that causes problems.
Andrew,
I know. So let's see. Was that all I had for the installer? Yep. No more Rev, Appliance Builder, and then simplified day 2 node add. I will dig up the docs maybe while Jonny is talking here in a moment and see if I can post those for the dev preview of the OC ADM node image stuff. That's all I got for the moment, Jonny. If you want to go over a few things.
Yep. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is like dynamic console plugins. We've had, I can't remember who it was that we had on the stream a long time ago, but they came on is right when the dynamic plugins were being introduced. And for me, like I'm working with a customer right now, and one of the things that like as we're kind of going through and we're talking through like what they want to do, I was like, man, it would be awesome if I was smart enough to create like a dynamic plugin, to where it could just show up in the console. You go and you plug some stuff in, and then like on the back end, things get updated and stuff happens. So then I saw like the 4.16 release where they made some updates to this. So I was just going to do a quick demo on how to add it using their examples from their from the OpenShift repo. So if I go and I share a tab here, hang on just a second. Oh, so a CD to the right directory. So what's going to happen is I'm on an OpenShift 4.16 cluster, and so what we're going to do is we're going to apply this wherever it's at. We're going to apply this OC manifest here, and what it's going to do is it's going to create a namespace. It's going to create a deployment with the console plugin application, and then it's going to create the service, and then we're going to actually see like the console plugin get created. And so now the big takeaway here is it's not so much what's in this file, it's about like it's really about the result. And when you think about it, think about like, okay, cool, if I want something in my interface that's my users can click on, or other administrators can click on, and they can do stuff, and it's like a visual representation of what's going on, then this is an awesome idea. So it's OC apply -F on this, and then once this creates, I'll drop this and we'll kick over to my console here. Bam. All right, so I just ran that OC apply, and really what we're waiting on now is we're waiting for the console to update. So here in a second or two, the operator is going to update. We should see a notification inside of the console window here that says that the web UI is refreshing. And what that's going to do is we'll see a little drop-down menu over here. So think about like you've got an application, like you want people to go click on it. Maybe it's cluster settings and namespaces, right? You want to be able to click on it and go and do things within that and be able to view and maybe even have like a form in there that people can do. So I've seen that with like clusters as a service and stuff like that. So let's see if I can kick this a little bit. This thing's being slow.
Johnny, can you make your window a little wider?
Yeah. That better?
Yeah, I think so. The geometry doesn't match and it sets off my OCD.
No, I got you. All right, so I'm just waiting on the.
Do you need to enable the dynamic plugin?
Oh my God, yes, I do. I'm sorry. That's what I get for trying to do it all from memory. All right, so let me stop sharing this and go back. Yep, my bad. I was trying to do it all from memory, and then I got all excited. All right, so we need to edit the operator. Oh my God, that's crazy. And under plugins, we need to add the dynamic demo plugin.
And there is a way to do that in the GUI. And I'm forgetting how at the moment.
Yeah, I was just going through like the example that they had in their on their GitHub page. So I was like, all right, this is kind of cool because then at least you can see it. So, all right, so now, my God, I cannot believe I forgot to do that. Just waiting on the plugin to update, and then we should see it. But the cool part too, like again, like I was saying, you want having this plugin and having this ability to update the UI, it really makes the console like the one-stop shop for everything, right? Like it puts it all in one spot where you can have security people come in and look, or you can have other administrators come in and look, other teams come in and do their thing. And this is taking a little longer than.
I'm looking forward to seeing more of our partners adding things in with the dynamic plugins. If you've ever seen the Dell Apex appliance, if you've ever seen it, like they have a plugin, directly in the interface where you can see and manage the hardware. The ODF folks, they have a plugin, when you install ODF where you can see and manage the storage system from directly inside of there. I know there's others out there. I'm just forgetting them. Fusion HCI, they have one as well.
Gotcha.
And Jamie, admin configuration. That sounds right.
Yep, it's right here. Configuration, admin configuration. I just did it.
Yeah.
And here's what I was looking for. So we've got this web console update. So we just refresh it. And so now we have a part of this accordion over here where we can click on it for dynamic plugin, and it's just going out and getting stuff from the API. We can look at different looking at the different pods. It's just I thought that this was awesome. And so for me, trying to think of like how can we take some of the other tools that we're using, like come up with a template. Once you write that template, it just kicks off another function and then starts building things. I don't know. I just think that the potential here is awesome.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those opportunities for, hey, I want to provide something that is specific to my organization that helps my particular users do something faster, better, etc. Sidebar for a moment. RHope9, I saw your comment about small screens and the way that it shows up and linking out to the gist. Where did it go in my chat here? The bookmarklet. So I'm going to pass that on to the docs folks, so that way they can take that into account with the platform and see if we can make it scale better for smaller screens and just more usable.
The other one that I was just it's not so much like not really a demo as much as it is like I think it's pretty awesome that in tech preview, right? Like we did an episode a long time ago using Cert Manager and deploying certificates to the cluster and stuff like that. But at the time, routes didn't support secrets as a means to upload the routes didn't words, Johnny, English, you can do it. Routes at the time did not support using secrets for the certificates, and so but Ingress did, and so now I think it's a tech preview feature where we can actually do that, where you can create a secret with the certs in it and then apply it to the route. And I'm like, this is awesome, because I thought for a while that this was just not going to happen. I thought that they were just like, we're good, but they're going through and they're actually making this work. And I'm excited about it because this is another one that we need to come back to. Do another Start Manager episode on this. Just kind of catch up, actually using the routes, applying the secret to the route, and seeing how it gets transformed and stuff like that. Because I think with Start Manager, using like maybe a Let's Encrypt or whatever as your provider, and then automatically doing this stuff, it's the way to be.
Yeah, well, and I think it just standardizes the experience, right? Of I don't want to have to put both my, CA, my secret, or let me think of it, my public and my private key into the route in order to have to publish that out. So, now we can treat it like a secret, just like everything else, and I can protect those appropriately.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see this one come along, even though it was sort of, it was not. Strangely, from what I understand, it was not directly because people like you and me, Johnny, complaining about why won't it do this, but rather it was the to your point, the secrets the certificate manager operator just increasing its functionality and making it better and easier to integrate with routes and stuff like that. So yeah, a win is a win. I won't look
100%.
else.
That's right. Yeah, I think that, and there was a lot of like churn, I think, on the Cert Manager side. So like, maybe on the Red Hat side of Cert Manager. So like to see this actually come in, it was a happy surprise. So
yeah. Basim, can you show us how to design OpenShift for running telco workloads? So fortunately, if we come down here in the docs, let's see, scalability and performance, reference design specifications, there are telco reference design specifications directly in the documentation. So just check out these docs, read through them, look for all the different things that are interesting and important to you. So you can see here reference design overview and all the things that it goes through. So I would definitely encourage you to start there. I'll post this link into the chat here. And yeah, I saw this the other day as I was going through the documentation, trying to look and see for anything that stood out to me. And it was like, oh, we have reference designs directly in the docs now, and saw that it was for telco. And I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff. They keep improving this section. If you go back, 10 versions, this section was only like 5 pages. And you see that there's just a ton of stuff that's now inside of here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So optimizing networking, OV and Kubernetes, and just all kinds of stuff in here, right? Impact of IPsec, CPU usage on the nodes. It's just giving you awareness of, hey, if you do this, some things might be affected. You might want to take that into account. Speaking of bare metal, I saw the thing here for, where'd it go? There was a thing here for managing bare metal hosts. So doing firmware updates using Redfish is now GA with OpenShift as well, including, I think you can do it right from install time. You can specify that you want to do updates to firmware and all that other stuff. So I thought that was really cool. That's another thing that's buried somewhere in the documentation. I think they did link it from the What's New presentation. If you go to that, so if we go to red.ht/next and new. So here's the recorded presentation, and down below are the slides. So you can always click on these slides. And if you go to one of these links, it'll actually take you to the PDF. And the PDF has all the links inside of it. So always a good starting point for all that. Sorry, I hijacked your time here, Johnny.
No. I was pretty much done. I just wanted to make sure that we talked about it. And then Jamie gave a good idea. Hopefully I'm saying his name right. About like, we should do like a Vault Cert Manager, integration stream, and then kind of like show one aspect of it where we're just doing Cert Manager with the routes getting the secrets, and then another aspect where we're hooking into Vault so that way people can see. Vault is such an awesome tool. Like being able to like have all your secrets in there and then call them through the APIs. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then external secrets operator is incredible.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I've got more. I can go on for a while here.
Oh, dude, it's all you. It's all you.
So if you just saw me click across, I thought this one was really cool. So you almost might have missed it if you were listening to the What's New live stream. So bandwidth aware resource scheduling, specifically with SRIOV. I thought this one was really interesting and really cool for a number of different features. We were just talking about telco reference architectures. So effectively what this does is it uses the resource, what is it called? There is a resource aware scheduler feature inside of OpenShift. So you can define resources, sort of arbitrary resources, inside of the nodes, and then use that as part of the requests associated with a pod and schedule against those. So what you end up with here is, for example, up here we have Intel NICs, and then we have the bandwidth associated with those NICs. And I define that as a schedulable resource or an allocatable resource on my nodes. And then my pods define, just like any other resource requests, I want one CPU and I want 10 gigabits of bandwidth off of one of these network adapters. And it allocates that in a request just like any other resource so that I can now control access to that and not, particularly for very important things, latency sensitive things using SRIOV, I'm not accidentally oversubscribing my network adapters. Any docs for that? Basim, any docs for which one? Bandwidth aware SRIOV. I will post this link.
I did. It's
the 8494 KCS. So super cool on this one. There's a number of other places where this is used. For example, if you're using OpenShift virtualization, there's KVM objects defined on each one of the nodes. So if I come here to like my nodes and I pick one of my worker nodes and look here at all the resources, one of these is like a KVM object. Here, devices. So you see this is my allocatable table. So you see I have KVM. So by default, it's only going to allow you to create 1,000 KVM virtual machines per node. So you can change that up. You can see, among other things, thank you, Help, for being overly helpful. Among other things, like huge pages. I don't have any huge pages defined on my particular node, so I have none that are allocatable if I wanted to go in and define those. Huge pages, along with the CPU scheduler, are important. So OpenShift Virtualization 4.14 introduced the concept of instance types. So if let's see here. So we'll create a VM from an instance type. So these instance types define certain sets of resources that are reserved or not, as the case may be, inside of the cluster. So if I go with a generic U-series isn't going to reserve any of the resources, right? I can choose one CPU, 1 gigabyte of memory, and it's just like any other pod. It's basically burstable. But if I go with, for example, the CX series, and if I hover over this, I don't know if you can see that, you see it provides exclusive compute resources. So basically what that means is it's going to reserve those CPU resources inside of there. So what does that actually look like? If I go to the instance types and I pick any one of these CX ones, so we'll go with CX1-2X large, and I'll look at the YAML. You see it's going to say dedicated CPU placement is true, isolated emulator thread is true, and it'll pass through NUMA resources. And then it also do huge pages by default. So it reserves 16 gigabytes of memory using 2 megabyte huge pages as it does that. So remember, all of these are configurable. You can remove these default ones provided by Red Hat. You can add your own. But just if you're ever using OpenShift virtualization and your users are trying to create those, they go in and they try and create, and I'll show you. So rel 9, let's do a CX1, medium, and I click create. What's going to happen is this virtual machine is not going to be allocatable or schedulable. And the reason for that is because I don't have CPU manager deployed in my cluster. So therefore it is unable to, 0 of 6 nodes are available, didn't match affinity because those are control plane nodes. Or didn't match affinity selector. And then the others are the master node or control plane nodes. So this affinity selector, if I come, let's see, go over here and I want the pod and I look at the YAML for it and come down here, node selector, CPU manager is true. So because I wanted to reserve or have those CPU resources allocated like that, my cluster needs to have CPU manager deployed to it. And then once that's there, then it will schedule onto those nodes. Going back to that reference design that we linked earlier, that's included in there. So just avoiding issues like that.
So when you mess with like the huge pages or any of those settings, right? Does that update the tuned profile inside the VM? And if you don't mess with that, does it just match to like a tuned profile on like maybe the host that it's coming from? Is that how?
I don't think it modifies the tuned profile. If I remember correctly, where's my docs? So huge pages. So the docs, again, they do a phenomenal job of explaining why you want to do this and all that. So configuring huge pages for VMs. So at the VM level, you see we want to assign huge pages.
Mhm.
So the amount of memory that we want and the page size that we want to use. But there is also, what happened to it? Nodes must have pre-allocated huge pages configured. It's at the top. So you can see here's the tuned profile. So I have to create this to create the huge piles huge piles. I have to create a tuned profile to allocate huge pages on the nodes, the physical nodes. And then once that's done, I can then create VMs that consume those huge pages at the level.
Okay. That's awesome. Okay, that's dope.
RHOPE 9, sorry, is what new in 4.16. This is one of those, there's a lag between us and the world. So it's anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds. So I don't know exactly what you're referring to. But seeing here for the docs that show how to separate OpenShift traffic from data traffic. So by default, I guess it depends on what you're trying to do there. So OpenShift traffic can mean a couple of different things. There is SDN traffic, so pod to pod across the SDN, which will travel the network adapter or adapters that the SDN is configured on. So let's switch back over here to my cluster. And if I look at networking, so if you have the nm state operator installed in your cluster, you'll have this node network state option available. This shows you the currently configured networking, host level networking for your nodes. So I'm just going to use this as an easy way to show you what my cluster looks like here. So this particular host has 3 Ethernet adapters inside of it, ENP1, 2, and 3 S0. So ENP1 is going to be the one that is used by OVN Kubernetes. And I can see that because if I look at the OVS bridges, I have BREX. BREX is the OVS bridge that's created for OVN Kubernetes. And, it's ENP2 S0. And if I look at the ports attached to it, it is attached to ENP2 S0, and that's how it is communicating with the world. If I were to look at the host's IP address, it would also show up as being assigned on that particular interface as well. So that's kind of how those things map. So pod-to-pod traffic is going to traverse at the physical level this ENP2 S0. If I create a bond out of multiple and add that on, right, it uses whatever's configured for that. So let's say that I want to use maybe ENP3 S0 for my storage traffic, iSCSI or NFS or something like that. Or maybe I just want to have a separate, dedicated, isolated network for communicating with something outside of that. Basically, we don't have to do anything special for that because underneath the covers, it's standard Linux networking. So long as the routes are in place and the routes are correct, it'll follow those rules. So what do I mean by that? let's say that this ENP1S0, and I'm choosing this one simply because it has an IP address that I can illustrate it with. ENP1S0 is on the same subnet as my iSCSI storage device. So long as the PVCs are specifying a target portal that is on this subnet, it'll just automatically send that traffic out this interface because that's what the route rules say, right? I'm sure if I were to open the command line terminal and debug in and do like a, IP net route show, I don't even remember the command. If I print the routes, it'll show me it's going to go out that default interface. Let's say that even though the traffic, or I have an IP address on this one, maybe my iSCSI device or my NFS device is on a different subnet, and my default route sits on this interface. In that case, I would use nmstate in order to define a route that says, hey, for this subnet or for this IP address, use this interface as the primary interface in order to get there. So that's one way that we can separate out that traffic based off of how it's or its purpose or what it's being used for. Probably the easiest way to do that. I don't know. I don't know if a route is a default one inside of your type. No, it's not. You would have to create it manually. So if I come up here to not installing, I want networking, and then I want so much documentation. Kubernetes nm state, observing and updating node network configuration, and then somewhere down in here is going to be not IP management, route. Yep. So you can see here's the route rules. So you can go in and define those as needed. So tons of, basically there we go. That's the example I was looking for. So here's how we would define those routes of saying, here's the default, you're going to use ETH0 or ETH1 rather. But I would define a route at the command line using the IP command or nmcli command rather. I would do the same thing from within here.
That's pretty cool.
About the virtualization templates. So I think that this actually came, I think it was tech preview in 4.14 and GA in 4.15 with the VM templates and instance types. So if I look at the catalog here, and this looks basically the same in 4.15, and by basically I mean I haven't noticed any differences. So I have two options here: instance types and catalogs. So instance types are great when I want to have a hyperscaler-like experience for provisioning VMs. Right? I choose the operating system that I want to use. So these are the ones provided out of the box by Red Hat. You can of course customize your own as you see fit. I select which instance type I want. So I'll go with U, and I'll go with 1 CPU and 2 gigabytes of memory. And that's basically all I need to provide in order to stand up a VM, right? If I want to change the storage class it's using, if I want to provide an SSH key out of the box, I can do all of that. And then I click create. So this is really cool for a couple of different reasons. One, from the GUI, right? It's like 3 clicks to get a VM. Behind the scenes, in my YAML, because I can create VMs using YAML, it dramatically simplifies creating VMs via the API because it reduces all of this configuration down to just a couple of lines.
Yeah.
Right? So I specify my U1 small, and that is my CPU and memory allocations. Quit jumping around on me. I specify in my preference. So the preferences are like guest OS specific customizations to the virtual machine configuration. The most important ones are probably for Windows, where we turn on the Hyper-V enlightenments. But it's, again, two lines here, right, in order to specify that. And I can see all of those things down here. So under instance types, I can go in, I can create my own. I always use the examples, right? So here, if we look at m1.large, and again, the YAML, you can see here, this M1 is memory. So it's going to use huge pages in this instance for all of that memory. But the CPU, you notice, only specifies 2. It's no longer topology manager or CPU manager. It's not reserved resources. It's not NUMA aware resources. It's just, here's 2 CPUs, but you have huge pages allocated. Preferences, as I said, preferences are really cool because they condense a lot of configuration that is specific for the guest OS. So if I look for, here we'll look at the RHEL 9 one. So RHEL 9, I look at the YAML here. This one's going to be pretty straightforward, right? Preferred disk bus, use VirtIO by default, not SCSI. Sometimes there'll be the NIC definition in here where it'll say use E1000 instead of using is it VirtIO? No, not VirtIO. I cannot think of the para-virtual network adapter. Anyways, the para-virtual KVM network adapter. Right. Oh, and you'll also see things like here, preferred use EFI. So use UEFI instead of BIOS, right? As the and secure boot by default. Whereas if I come down here to the Windows side, go to the next page. So let's look at Windows 2019. So down here, it has like, here's all of the Hyper-V enlightenments and stuff like that to help Windows virtual machines perform better in KVM. Just all of this other stuff, where normally you would have to have all of this defined inside of each virtual machine. Now it's, kind of object-oriented. It's a reference. You can also see a bit of that in the templates. So if I look at the templates, if you want to see what it used to look like, if I come down here to, I don't know why some of these things are paginated and some aren't. Like, why is this one not paginated? So here, if I look at the Windows 2019 server large and I look at the YAML, yeah, that's a very large block to tell me that I can't modify anything. Anyways, if I eventually get down here, you'll see, look, here's all of those features and they're defined on every single instance of this Windows template. So it's a lot of code and a lot of repetitiveness that just doesn't need to be there. So the preferences separated that out. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I realized that was a tangent.
Well, so if you have extra additional Cloud Init stuff that you want to do inside of the VM, can you add it to one of those preferences files, or is that something else that you would just add to the template that gets called in? Where would you add that in?
That's a good question. I think it would go. Actually, I don't know. So in a template, I know you can, at the template level, I can go in and I can modify. If I get down here far enough, there'll be a section for Cloud Init. So you can see here, the default Cloud Init is going to generate a password and put this in here. But with an instance type, I don't know where it actually puts that information at. It might be, maybe it is in here. That's a good question.
I'm just
now I'm going to have
from
to
an automation perspective, right? It just seems, everything else seems like it's in place for any type of automation that you want to use, right?
Yeah. Because it does apply it. If I the VM that I created go virtual machines. So here's the red swallow, the one that I created. If I look at it, it does have that Cloud in it. You can see here. So it's coming from somewhere. I just don't know where it is off the top of my head. I'll have to dig into that and figure it out. That's
cool.
Let's see, what time is it? 12:24. So we still got a little bit of time. Other stuff that's happening. So storage. Apologies to anybody with sensitive ears. Close them now. But I'm pretty sure hell has frozen over because the CIF/SMB CSI driver is in tech preview. I never thought I'd see that happen, but here we are. Yeah, you see tech preview feature. So if you are using SMB, CIFS is from I don't think CIFS is even a thing anymore because I think Microsoft deprecated and removed it back after several wormable 0-day exploits were found. It hasn't been relevant since Windows 2008. So I guess if you have some ancient, Windows boxes out. So SMB V2, V3 is sort of the modern one. But if you have, CIFS SMB shares and you want to use those with CSI, then you can do that now. It's just tech preview. So I know we do have some folks out there doing that. SMB3 is actually a really cool protocol. You can do some really interesting things there. If you're using various Microsoft products, so SQL Server, Exchange, Hyper-V, etc., they use SMB3 to do some just really high throughput, low latency type of stuff. It is not the ultra chatty kind of, not, SIFs in particular, SMB2, they were okay, but they weren't great. SMB3 has some really cool stuff going for it. So
Nice.
And then read write once pod. So RWOP. So RWOP is a new, or I think it was Kubernetes 1.28 or 29 was when this came out. So it is a new access mode for PVCs. There we go. So since the very beginning, we've had read write once, where basically the PVC is only mounted once and it is available to pods on that node. Read only many, meaning it is mounted by multiple nodes, but is read only for any that are accessing it. Read write many, where it is mounted to multiple nodes and all pods across all of the nodes can both read and write to that. And then read write once pod. So you notice I very deliberately said read write once. It is mounted once per node. So if I have multiple pods that are all assigned to the same RWO PVC, what we'll see happen is when the first one is scheduled, the RWO PVC is mounted to the node, and then that pod begins accessing it. Other pods that access or have defined, are bound to, I guess, that same RWO PVC will end up scheduled to that same node. And then the node allows them to all access that same PVC at the same time. So it's read write once in the sense of only one node at a time is accessing the PVC, but multiple pods on that one node can access the PVC. Read write once pod solves that, where now only one pod on that one node is allowed to access that particular PVC. So it's now GA, I think it was GA with Kubernetes 1.29, if I remember correctly. And it's now, fully supported in GA and OpenShift as well, if you happen to have use for that.
Nice.
So storage stuff, aside from that, storage is always progressing. The entry drivers continue to be pulled out. I think 4.14 was the last time that we had the entry vSphere CSI or vSphere volume driver. So if you're now using OpenShift 4.15 or later, you should be using vSphere CSI. But yeah, you can see there's just a whole ton of these that just continue to expand over time. We had, who was it? Frank? No, it wasn't Frank. I'm trying to remember who we had somebody come on the stream. It's been a while ago to talk about a number of these storage things. We just continue to see these improve. I'm looking at my list over here.
I think OLM, we got it. Oh yeah,
there's a few things. So OLM, Operator Lifecycle Manager. So OLM 1.0 is tech preview, if you are willing to check that out. So if you choose to use OLM 1.0, which is currently tech preview, probably the most interesting thing, there's a ton of stuff that happened with the OLM 1.0, but kind of the most obvious one is we're no longer calling operators operators. They're now cluster extensions. That's going to be a hard change for me, if I'm being honest. Because when you think about it, it makes sense to call them this, right? Because an operator was just a convenient way of describing the combination of a CRD, a custom resource definition, which is an extension of the Kubernetes API, and then the pod or whatever service inside of the cluster is doing whatever with that CRD. Those two things together were an operator, and they were managed by Operator Lifecycle Manager. So calling it a cluster extension, because that's literally what it is, just makes sense. It's just one of those, this is just like the Yum DNF thing that we talked about earlier. It's going to take me a while to adjust to this one. So when you see this change happen, don't be alarmed. They are the same thing, just with a new name. But we definitely want to have the OLM folks come on and talk about OLM 1.0 and all of the changes and all the things that are happening there. OLM, I said at the very beginning that one of basically the driving change and the reason why we went from OpenShift 3 to OpenShift 4 was operators.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing this progress and seeing OLM reach 1.io is just huge to me. And we definitely want to have them on.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the cool things about this with the 1.0 too is that like the way that the operator cleans up after itself is going to be better with 1.0. Where like right now, if you've ever installed an operator, you know that there's CRUD that's left behind. Like the cleanup part of that is going to be a lot better on this. So like the overall management and like just health, whatever. There's a word I'm trying to think of, but I can't think of it right now. But it will be much better.
Yeah. So yeah, OLM, keep an eye out here. Yes, you can see for more information, operator controller. All of this is in the docs. Look through this. Remember tech preview, when you go in and turn on the tech preview feature flag, it marks the cluster as both unsupported and non-updatable. So if this is something that is interesting to you, if you're developing operators, if you're running your own custom operators inside of the cluster, check this out for sure in your developer clusters. So that way, you know what's going to happen. Keep an eye on it, but I think this one is going to be really, really cool. What else is going on here? I've only got 2 other categories of things to talk about quickly because I know that we're eating up a lot of time here. So RCOS. So from a Red Hat Core OS perspective, one, RHEL worker nodes are deprecated. So if we come up here to release notes and we search for RHEL, somewhere down through here, we will find RHEL 9.4 for the underlying RHEL for CoreOS. Anyways, package-based RHEL compute machines, you can see, are now deprecated. So package-based RHEL compute machines is a weird way of saying basically RHEL compute nodes. So historically, RCOS was required for control plane nodes, and then for compute nodes, you had the option of using either RHEL or RCOS. In 4.16, RHEL is now deprecated. RCOS is now preferred. So historically, the rule is, not always, but the rule is something will be deprecated for at least 3 releases before it's removed. So that means that you can kind of expect no earlier than 4.19, at least out through 4.18. RHEL compute nodes will continue to be supported. But if that's something that you're using, start planning on how to accommodate, for whatever reason it is you're using RHEL, the move to RCOS. So Andrew's opinion, having talked with folks over the last 5 years, why do we use RHEL compute nodes? Most of the time, it's because, we have things like security agents, antivirus agents, right? All of these things that we want to deploy and manage as a package, our RPM inside of our nodes. We're at the point now with RCOS layering where that should be a solved problem. So let's do layering here. And so we have this Red Hat Enterprise Linux CoreOS image layering. So what this does is it gives us the ability to add packages to our CoreOS images. We've talked about this before. We've shown it a couple of times. You can see all the way back to 4.12 it was supported. But literally what I'm doing is I'm defining a cluster, a container file that says, from this particular image, run an RPM OS tree command to deploy. You can see here it's deploying an RPM onto that image, does the cleanup and the commit. And then I add that container image, or I update the machine config to point to that container image, and it will add that, or it will not add that. It will deploy that RPM OS tree, words are hard, layer to my RCOS nodes, the ones that match that machine config. So this is how we would go in and deploy things like that antivirus agent or that security monitoring agent, whatever it happens to be, to each one of our nodes. You'll note that we have out of cluster and on cluster as of 4.16. So on cluster means that you see I'm defining I'm not defining a specific Quay image like I am down here in out of cluster, because we add this file into the cluster itself, and then the cluster will go through and will rebuild those CoreOS images automatically for us. So I think if we come down here, using on cluster to apply a custom layered image, note that it is tech preview at the moment to use the on cluster. But here is our machine OS config. Here's our container file input that says, here is the things that I want to install. And then anytime that there is an RCOS update that needs to be applied to the nodes, it will automatically rebuild that RCOS image, add in our custom content, and then push it out to the nodes. Whereas out of cluster, which is the currently fully supported way of doing it, me, the administrator, I am responsible for rebuilding that CoreOS image each time and making it available. Hopefully that made sense.
Man, I can just... Oh, people are going to be mad.
Maybe. Yeah, RPMOS tree isn't new. It's one of those things.
No, not at all.
If I know a lot of folks ask, or a lot of folks use, for example, Fedora Silverblue, it's RPMOS tree based. RCOS has been in use for ages. Before that, it was, what was the RHEL-based container operating system?
Oh, are you talking about Atomic?
Atomic, yes, thank you. Before that, it was Atomic. Red Hat Device Edge uses RPMOS tree. You could look at bootc as being kind of the same thing, just now we're again using container image definitions to define our operating system. Like, I think that this is evolving, and it's something that's kind of really interesting and really powerful, because I have declarative OS configuration natively in the platform, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think by and large, like the overall acceptance of like the non-RHEL worker nodes, compute nodes, is going to be fine. But it's always like those niche people that are just holding on to like, having that, like, oh, I need a real worker, and I don't want to do like, because I had a customer that was like, they didn't trust CoreOS at the time, so it's like they didn't know it, and so they were really completely against it, and so it was a big inhibitor for them to go into OpenShift 4, because they were just absolutely against going to CoreOS. So it's like that's the ones I'm talking about that are going to be upset, like just this handful of NAPS customers.
Yeah, well, drivers I think is another one. If you have custom drivers, things that aren't either aren't in the kernel, or the kernel version doesn't work with your hardware, or whatever that happens to be. I was talking with a storage partner recently, and they have a kernel module that they use, and this was the solution that we offered.
That's awesome.
Butane. I'm glad you brought up butane, Jamie. So if anybody doesn't know butane, so Butane. So butane is, it's, what did they call it when I talked to them? Syntactic sugar. It's a way that, so here's a butane file, right? And it abstracts doing things at the node level with machine config. So I write a simplistic YAML file that says, here, create a crony file that has, these properties associated with it. And then I use butane to then generate that. So see, here's my butane command. And the output of that is going to be the machine config YAML that I use in order to do that. So it makes it much easier to do host level configuration instead of having to try and figure out all of the different quirks and differences in machine config versions between OpenShift versions, right? I have tell it my OpenShift version, here's what I want it to do, and it generates that for me. So butane is really cool. I definitely encourage folks to, here, creating machine configs with butane. So here's another example. Definitely, if you want to do any kind of OS customization, check out butane, including awesome. It does things with, we've shown this on the stream before, but it's been a long time. Like if you want to create or use special disk dedicated partition for, varlib containers or something like that, all of that is done, here, adding kernel modules to nodes. All of this stuff is all in here. So really cool stuff. I definitely encourage you to check that out. So thank you for that. Syntactic Sugar would be a great 80s band name. Or, it is the 2020s, so everything old is new again. So maybe it makes sense now.
Also true, right? Good tribute, man.
So rhope9, sorry to ask a long past question. Format that you can manage these types of VM templates and move customized sizes between. I'm not sure I understand your question, rhope9. Can manage types of VM templates and move the customized sizes between clusters. If you mean, so let's come back over here. So if you mean like these templates, so these templates / instance types / preferences, they're all YAML objects. So probably the most straightforward way would be to use something like GitOps or Ansible to ensure that they are present across, or even ACM and is it ACM application or policy? I don't remember off the top of my head.
Policy.
Yeah, so you use an ACM policy to ensure that all of those things exist across all of your different clusters. That's probably the way that comes to mind at the moment. I don't think the operator has anything where you can specify like, here's a custom repo location for all of my templates, profiles, and instance types. So please automatically replace all the default ones with these.
Although it would be kind of cool if there was like there's a Helm chart repository, right, where it's got all the Helm charts that Red Hat supports, right? And it would be kind of cool to have like a template repo, like as an external, right? You maybe plug in a URL and it goes to your Git repo and it maps. I don't know. That does seem kind of cool. I don't know how big of a need there is for that. That might be pretty niche.
Yeah, the VM stuff it's as it becomes more widespread, I'm seeing more and more really cool things happening. One of the folks I work with, she's creating a thing. It like has a proof of concept of using Developer Hub with OpenShift virtualization. So I go into Developer Hub, I click the button, and it uses GitOps on the back end. So basically, it goes and deploys an application across my thing. So it can consist of virtual machines, it can consist of containers, I can trigger other things. Like basically I have this application catalog, all that can be triggered and configured from Developer Hub, which is just really, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, template clearinghouse. Yeah. Let's see. Talked about that. We talked about that. Let's look at this one. Oh, I lost my window. So scaling virtual machines, vSphere virtual machines using static IP addresses. So this is a really cool one. So you see here, vSphere machine provider spec. I can specify static IPs inside of these things now. Ready to go. Machine set scaling with machines configured with static IP addresses. So you see we create an IP pool, we define all those in there, and it just goes through and it assigns them out to each one of our nodes. So this is something that I think folks have been asking for ages. I'm really happy to see that appear and being able to do that at the OpenShift level instead of relying on something external, specifically DHCP, in order to do that. There is, so I think it was introduced in 4.15, but the ability to do a user managed load balancer with an IPI deployment. So if we go to installing, let's see if I can find this off the top of my head. Network customizations.
I remember this right there.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, that's services though.
Yeah, user managed load balancer. So by default, and historically with IPI, we assign a virtual IP address for the API endpoint and a virtual IP address for the star.apps endpoint. And those IP addresses are managed using keep alive D across the members of the cluster. The first few versions, so let's see, vSphere IPI first shipped in 4.5, I think, maybe 4.6. The first few versions, there was no real configurability there. I think it was 4.10 or 4.11 was when we added the ability to move the apps endpoint to an external load balancer, basically by changing the DNS entry for star.apps to point to that external load balancer and being okay, we moved it. And then I want to say in 4.12 or 4.13, we added the ability to also do the API load balancer for that. So what this does is this completely bypasses that. It doesn't use keep alive D. It doesn't configure those VIPs on the cluster at all. It uses this external, user managed load balancer. So the thing that's weird here is, and the docs walk through a number of these different things, but you see it has this target all IP addresses on a subnet. Because the assumption is DHCP is assigning out IP addresses. So I put my nodes into that subnet, DHCP assigns IP addresses, and I just have my load balancer look across the entire subnet for whatever IP addresses are there and whatever ports respond, and that's where it's going to send those things. So it's not the most graceful thing using it that way, but it is definitely an option if that's what you want to do. I haven't talked with the Splat folks recently to find out, but I think that this is going to be improved over time, but I don't have a time frame or even what that specifically looks like. But it is an option there if you want to use those, if you don't want to use the default IPI load balancer. But the static IPs thing, I think that's really cool. I don't know if it works with control plane machine sets off the top of my head. I would want to look into that. And control plane machine sets with vSphere are now, I think, the default.
Oh, that's awesome. So they moved over, huh?
Yep. Let's see. Looking at my big old list here. One of the things. Hopefully, you heard about this. I think we've only got like one or two things left. So the EUS versions, so OpenShift 4. The even numbered versions, 4.14, 4.16, so on and so forth, now have a 3-year life cycle. So if you don't want to update those periodically, then so OpenShift life cycle. So if we look at this guy, you see we have this extended update support term 2, which goes out to 3 full years, which is really cool. So commencing with OpenShift Platform 4.14, an additional 12 months of extended update support. So I know it's difficult, can be challenging for folks sometimes to update as frequently as we make releases. There's 3 releases every year, approximately every 4 months. And historically support was 2 years. Now we have it out to 3, and you can see it fully detailed here. We released on June 27th, 2024. It goes all the way out through 2027, 2026. Really, really awesome for a number of different industries. Last one I got, global network policy, admin global network policy. So let's paste this guy here. You can see the blog post is from last year when it was first introduced as, I believe, a tech preview feature. So admin network policy, and if I come over here to my documentation, allows you, the administrator, to define network policy that is automatically globally applied and cannot be overridden at the namespace level. So what does that mean? I liken this to, how you always have an app team or an administrator who just loathes SE Linux, even though it's 2024 and it hasn't really gotten in the way in at least a decade. So
yes.
Okay, I just got my brand new rel node. The first command I type is set enforce 0, right?
Yep.
And then the security team is beside themselves. So admin network policy basically means that as the administrator, I can say, you globally, no one can expose or no one can be connected. No pods can connect to each other on port, 22. Pulling random ports, even though I know that's SSH. And you cannot go in as the user at the namespace level and create a network policy that does allow that connection. So Andrew's, skewed perspective of the world. Remember, I've been doing a lot of virtualization lately. This is really cool with virtual machines, right? Because with virtual machines, when I use OVS and OVN secondary networks with the local net topology, they can be affected by network policy. So I have a virtual machine. It's connected to a local net secondary network, which means that it's passed through out to the outside world. It's connecting to a VLAN, VLAN 123 or VLAN 789. I can apply network policy at the namespace level that says, oh, block all connections except for port 3306, right? Or only allow connections on, port 22 from these IP addresses. Or I can remove that. I can allow global connections, right? Maybe I don't want that. With admin network policy, I can now enforce things as the platform administrator that says, oh, globally, no matter what it's connected to, you can only connect to port 22 SSH into my virtual machines from this set of IP addresses, right? Wherever my Bastion host is, or wherever my jump host is in the secure enclave. And the users of those namespaces cannot override that. So this one is, I think this is really cool. I'm really excited to see this one come to fruition. I think it's been baking for a couple of versions now. So security folks, yeah.
And it's the other part about this too, right? It's like, so you've got the admin network policy, and then like the user managed or developer managed network policy, and then there's like the baseline one that sits on top of that, right? So it's like now you've got this layered, and I think the baseline is it's another cluster level, but it's also like, it's just like layered security. So like you can enable global security features, like you're saying, at the admin network policy, and then they can apply some stuff, and then there's some other things that you can configure that are just like the catch-all, right? So the things that if you're not accounting for it anywhere in these two layers, it'll just dump out to that guy.
Yep.
Or let it through.
Yep. That's all I got. That's my big old list. iSCSI root disk support is now added. That one I've been seeing for a couple of years now. So the story there, sorry, I saw one on my list that was not checked off that I missed. So historically, we support, I want to say Arcos supports fiber channel disks for booting, for installation, but we did not support iSCSI except with like one installer method. I want to say it was like either agent-based or assisted installer supported it, or maybe the default installer supported it, but agent/assisted didn't, or something like that. So iSCSI root disks are now supported across the board. Personally, anecdotally, I see this most of the time with things like Cisco UCS, in particular with like NetApp FlexPod configurations, where UCS has blades. The blades have no disks in them, and I'm using iSCSI to connect over to my ONTAP system to get the root disks for my physical servers. So it's nice to finally add that in and get that fully supported across all the different installation methods.
Yes. I haven't used iSCSI forever. I think it's been forever.
Oh yeah. I switch between. Well, I don't use Fiber Channel very often because I don't have Fiber Channel in my lab. But other than that, I switch between them pretty regularly.
Gotcha.
Okay, now I really am done. Now I really have no other unchecked check marks or check boxes with no check in them.
I have one last one that's really it's more of a statement than anything. It's like self-managed hosted control planes are supported in AWS now. So up until 4.16, self-managed, meaning you deploy your cluster in AWS and you manage it. So outside of the entire managed service paradigm, hosted control planes was tech preview, but now it's GA and fully supported, which is it's awesome. That's good. It's first class citizen, which is it's good if that's the route that you're going, because hosted control planes are amazing.
Yeah. Speaking of hosted control planes, I'll say at least 80% of the time when we talk about hosted control planes, usually the first thing that folks will ask about is, doesn't that make the hosting cluster a single point of failure? So fortunately, that's been addressed. So if we look for a hosted control plane, so if we look in here, So here's hosted control planes. Here's the overview. So we have this high availability for hosted control planes. And if you look through this set of documentation, it walks you through all the different scenarios and what it means and how to protect against each one of those inside of there. So if you're considering hosted control planes, if you're worried about the impact of what happens if the hosting cluster were to fail or were to otherwise be affected, start here. If you have questions, concerns after that, feel free to reach out to us, reach out to your account team, and we can certainly walk through and bring in the right folks to talk about that. But my approach is, when you look at Rosa, right? Rosa has two models: Rosa Classic and Rosa Hosted control planes. If the Rosa team and the set of SREs there are comfortable and confident enough in the technology to be using it for our customers, that to me is it's hard to get a better endorsement of the technology and its resiliency and the amount of trust that they have in it. So I have confidence in it.
Yeah, that's as dogfooding as dogfooding gets right there, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
you're not going to find a better use case than that.
Is IPsec still an issue for hosted control planes? I don't know. I don't know that I knew it was an issue. So I hope not. Ping me an email, because I actually do have a hard stop here in 3 minutes. My calendar helpfully reminded me, because my do not disturb ended. If you'll send us an email, happy to follow up on that and check to make sure. With that, and as I just said, so closing out the stream here, thank you everyone for joining us today. I know that this one has been longer than usual, but we just had so much stuff that's happening in 4.16 that we wanted to talk about and cover in at least some detail here. Poke at some things, talk about some things, even if it's just in the documentation. Showing where it's at is oftentimes helpful, as well as describing why we do these things, right? Why it's important, why it matters to you. So if you have any questions, if you saw anything here that you want to know more about, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. JONNY, Jonny at redhat.com, or SULLY, Sully at redhat.com. Both of us are also on the Kubernetes Slack in the OpenShift users channel. It's also, the OpenShift users channel is a few thousand of our closest friends there on there. I will also point out that OpenShift Commons is growing as well. So you can join the OpenShift Commons, and that's okd.io, I think. Or no, commons.org. No, openshift.org. Gosh, I'll get it one of these times. Here.
Yeah, I got it.
Org. So, yeah, and it takes you over here. So this community is growing in leaps and bounds. If you look somewhere on here, I want to say the blog. Is it on here? No, community. And somewhere in here on their site, there is a link. So OpenShift Commons Day, which will be held the day before KubeCon Salt Lake City. So they have an open call for papers right now for anybody who wants to come and talk about and show what you're doing with OpenShift. If you happen to dig up that specific link, Jonny, please post that.
Yep. If anything, I'll have it in the description of the video. Awesome.
Thank you. So definitely keep an eye out for what's happening with Commons and the stuff that's there. Why can I not? OpenShift.io. OpenShift.io. I don't know why I'm having trouble remembering the OpenShift Commons site. Commons.openshift.org. There you go. Anyways, so from here, there should be a link somewhere on here that goes out to that call for paper. You can also reach out to your account team. I know it's been advertised broadly within Red Hat, and they're going to continue banging that drum. So we would love to hear from you. Love to see you there. I will not be in Salt Lake City. Jonny, I don't think you'll be there either.
Oh.
So if you're going, congratulations. I'm envious. I haven't been to a KubeCon in a few years now, so I miss going to those. They're a lot of fun.
KubeCon is fun.
Yeah. With that, thank you so much for joining us today. We really greatly appreciate it. Don't hesitate to reach out. We are always here to help. And we will see you next week. I think we might have a partner on next week. I don't know if we've gotten confirmation back yet, Jonny. If not, we will, maybe we'll fill in with that disconnected episode.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of your week.
See ya.